behind every thought you have ever had, behind every worry, every plan, every memory, there is something that does not change. It is quiet. It is vast. And it has always been here. The Buddhist teachers called it awareness. The Zen masters sometimes called it your original nature. Tonight, we will call it the sky. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Thoughts come and go like clouds. Feelings rise and pass like weather. But the sky is always there. No storm has ever harmed it. No cloud has ever made it smaller. It does not need to be created or earned. It is what you already are. The teachings tonight come from the tradition of Zen and Buddhism. They are old and they are simple. They do not ask you to believe anything. They only invite you to notice what is already true. So let yourself settle in. There is no need to follow every word or stay awake. Just rest and let whatever reaches you reach you. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. There is a moment, and you may have experienced it already tonight, when you catch yourself thinking. You were somewhere else, lost in a memory or a plan or a worry, and then suddenly you noticed. I was thinking. That moment of noticing is small, but in Buddhism, it is considered one of the most important things a human being can do. Because in that moment, something extraordinary happens. You are no longer inside the thought. You are standing beside it, looking at it. And from there, everything is different. An old Buddhist teacher was once asked by a student, "How do I deal with my thoughts during meditation? There are so many of them. They pull me in every direction." The teacher said, "When a thought arrives, greet it. Say to yourself, 'Ah, a thought about the future,' or 'a thought about something I regret.' Then let it go on its way. You do not need to invite it in for tea. You do not need to argue with it at the door. Just see it, name it gently, and return to where you are." The student tried this for a while and came back. "It helps," he said. "But sometimes the thoughts are so strong. They pull me in before I can even name them. I am lost for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and only then do I realize I have been thinking." "Of course," said the teacher. "That is their nature, and that is perfectly fine. But here is what you will discover. Each time you name a thought, even after it has pulled you in, something loosens. The naming itself is the freedom. You do not have to catch the thought the moment it arrives. You only have to name it when you wake up inside it. Whether that takes a second or an hour makes no difference. The moment of naming is always the moment of freedom. And the thoughts do not stop." The student asked. "No," said the teacher. "Thoughts do not stop, but your relationship to them changes. And that changes everything. This simple teaching, the art of gently naming what is happening in the mind, is one of the oldest and most practical tools in all of Buddhism. It is found across traditions, from the Zen monasteries to the forest temples of Southeast Asia, from the mountain hermitages to the village meditation halls. And it works because of something very simple. In the moment you name a thought, you step outside of it. The thought becomes something you can observe rather than a world you are lost in. It is like the difference between being caught in a dream and realizing you are dreaming. The dream may continue for a while, but your relationship to it has changed completely. Here is something most people recognize when they begin paying attention to their own thinking. We do not have as many different thoughts as we imagine. We have perhaps a handful of themes that repeat themselves endlessly, in different combinations, wearing different costumes, but always circling back to the same concerns. A Buddhist teacher once called these our top 10 hits, and there is something both humbling and oddly comforting about that phrase. You probably know yours already. If you are honest, you can list them. There is the one about work, the one about whether you are doing enough, whether you are falling behind, whether you made the right choice somewhere along the way. There is the one about a relationship, the familiar tangle of longing or frustration or distance that runs through your mind like a well-worn path. There may be one about your health, or about money, or about some unresolved situation that has been sitting in the back of your mind for months or even years, neither fixed nor forgotten. And there is likely one about yourself, a quiet judgment that surfaces again and again, wearing slightly different words each time, but always carrying the same weight. What is remarkable is how convincing they are each time they appear. A thought you have had 300 times can arrive on the 301st occasion and still feel brand new, still feel urgent, still feel like something you need to solve right this minute. That is the nature of thought. It does not announce itself as a rerun. It always shows up in fresh clothing. The Buddha compared habitual thinking to a river that has been flowing in the same channel for a very long time. The water follows the path of least resistance. It does not choose to flow this way. It simply does, because the groove has been carved so deep by repetition. And so our minds return, again and again, to the same few rivers of thought. Not because these thoughts are the most important or the most useful, but because they are the most familiar. The channel is already there. The water knows no other way. There is no blame in this. It is simply how minds work. But there is great value in knowing what your top 10 are, because once you recognize a familiar thought, it loses some of its authority. The first time a worry arrives, it can feel urgent and new, as if it requires immediate attention. But the 17th time the same worry arrives, if you have been paying attention, you can meet it differently. Ah, you again. I know you. You were here yesterday and the day before that. You feel important, but I have learned that you always feel important, and the thing you warn me about rarely comes to pass. That is the power of naming. It transforms a demand into a visitor. And visitors, as we shall see, do not have to stay forever. There is a story from the Buddhist teachings about a woman who lived in a small village at the edge of a forest. She was a weaver by trade, skilled and patient with her hands, and she was known among her neighbors for her kindness and her willingness to help. But she had a private struggle that no one saw. Her mind was like a house full of uninvited guests. From the moment she woke to the moment she fell asleep, they came and went as they pleased. Worry came in through the front door. Regret climbed through the window. Self-doubt sat in the best chair and refused to leave. And all day long, she tried to manage them, arguing with some, hiding from others, exhausting herself in the effort. One autumn, she walked into the forest to visit a Buddhist nun who lived alone in a small hut among the trees. The nun was very old and had a quality of stillness about her that the woman found calming. "I cannot find any peace," the woman said. "My mind is full of unwelcome visitors. They come at all hours. I have tried to push them out, but they only come back louder. I have tried to reason with them, but they do not listen. What can I do?" The nun poured her a cup of tea and sat with her for a moment before speaking. "Tell me," she said, "when a stranger knocks at your door, what do you do?" "I open it. I see who it is, and if it is someone you do not wish to spend time with, I greet them politely, and then I go about my business. You do not wrestle them to the ground and drag them out of your house." The woman laughed. "No, that would be exhausting. And yet," said the nun gently, "that is exactly what you are doing with your thoughts." She let that sit for a moment. The woman was quiet. "Your thoughts are visitors," the nun continued. "Some will be pleasant, and you will enjoy their company. Some will be uncomfortable, and you will wish they had not come. But they are all visitors. They arrive, they stay for a time, and they leave. Your only task is to notice who has come in. Give them a name if you like. Ah, worry has arrived. Hello, old friend. And then let them sit where they sit, and turn your attention back to whatever is actually here. The feel of the cup in your hands, the sound of the wind in the leaves, the warmth of this room. What if they refuse to leave?" the woman asked. "They always leave," the nun said. "That is the one thing every visitor does eventually. Your trouble is that you keep going over to them and asking them to stay longer by fighting with them. Each time you argue with a thought, you are giving it another cup of tea." The woman returned home and tried this. At first, it felt strange. When worry arrived, instead of trying to fix whatever the worry was about, she simply noticed it. Worry is here. When self-doubt showed up, she did not try to prove it wrong. She just recognized it. "Ah, doubt. You again." What surprised her most was how much lighter everything became. The visitors did not stop coming. They still knocked at the door every morning. But now she knew their names. She knew their habits. Worry always came early, before the day had even begun. Regret preferred the evenings. Self-doubt liked to arrive when she was tired. And she found that when she stopped wrestling with them, they took up far less room. They came, they sat quietly in the corner, and after a while, they wandered out on their own. There was one visitor, though, who was harder than the rest. A thought about her worth, about whether she truly mattered. This one did not sit quietly. It followed her around the house. It whispered while she worked. It was there when she lay down at night. She told the nun about this on her next visit. "Some visitors are louder than others," the nun said. "Some have been coming for so long that they feel like members of the household. But even these are visitors. Even the oldest, most persistent thought you carry is still something that comes and goes. It is not the house itself, and it is not you." "How do I know that?" the woman asked. "Because you can see it," the nun said simply. "If it were truly who you are, you could not stand apart from it and observe it. The fact that you can watch it arrive, the fact that you can name it, means that you are the one who watches. You are the awareness. The thought is just a guest who has overstayed." The woman sat with this for a long time. Then she smiled. "You have discovered something important," the nun said. "You are not your visitors. You are the one who greets them at the door." This is the heart of what Buddhist mindfulness teaches about thinking. We are not asked to empty the mind. We are not asked to have only good thoughts or to achieve some perfect state of inner silence. We are asked simply to know what is happening, to name it softly and without judgment, and then to come home. And what is home? In this teaching, home is what is actually here, right now, before thinking adds its commentary. It is the raw aliveness of this moment, the sounds in the room around you, the feeling of your body resting where it rests, the temperature of the air on your skin, the quiet rhythm of your breathing. It is everything that is real and present and available right now, the things that were here before the thought started and that will still be here after the thoughts pass through. In Zen, they sometimes speak of this as just this breath, just this sound, just this moment. There is nothing missing from it. There is nothing that needs to be added to it. It is complete as it is, and when we arrive in it fully, even for a few seconds, there is a quality of wholeness that the thinking mind spends its entire life searching for and never quite finds. Because you cannot think your way to presence. You can only stop thinking for a moment and notice that presence is already here. The Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once described it simply. He said, "Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. That is all. Just knowing what is happening as it happens. And in that knowing, there is a kind of peace that is hard to describe but easy to recognize once you feel it. It is the peace of being exactly where you are, instead of where your thoughts keep trying to take you. Because here is what the Buddhist teachers have long observed, and it is worth hearing. When we are lost in thought, we leave our senses behind. We stop feeling the body. We stop hearing the sounds around us. We stop being here. The mind flies off into yesterday or tomorrow, and the body is left behind. But the senses are always in the present moment. They can only be here. Your ears can only hear what is happening now. Your skin can only feel what is touching it right now. The warmth of a blanket, the coolness of the air, the weight of your own body resting where it rests. These things are not memories or projections. They are real, and they are happening now. When you return your attention to the senses, even briefly, something shifts. There is a settling, a kind of arrival. You have been traveling, wandering through corridors of thought, and suddenly you are back. Here, in this room, in this body, in this moment. And there is a quiet richness to it that thought can never quite capture. The actual sound of rain, if rain is falling. The actual feeling of your own breathing. These things are so ordinary that we overlook them constantly, and yet they are the realest things in our experience. They are what is actually happening right now, while the mind is busy narrating something else. The Buddha said, "There is no path to peace. Peace is the path." This teaching is like that. Naming a thought is not a step towards some future freedom. It is freedom in the moment you do it. Each time you notice a thought and recognize it gently, you are already free. You were lost, and now you are found. You were in the dream, and now you have woken up. And it does not matter how many times you have to do it. It does not matter if you have to do it 100 times in a single evening. Each return is complete in itself. Each time you come home, you are fully home. And every time you return to the senses, even for one breath, you are discovering something that no amount of thinking could reveal. There is more to you than the voice in your head. There is this quiet presence that exists underneath all the noise. It does not depend on your thoughts being pleasant or unpleasant. It does not require anything of you. It is simply here. It has always been here, like the sky behind the clouds, like the clear water beneath the mud. You are not your visitors. You are the open, quiet awareness that has room for all of them. Take a breath now. Feel where your body meets whatever you are resting on. There is no need to go anywhere else. And whenever you feel settled, we will continue together. There is a teaching in Zen Buddhism that freedom is never far away. It is never something we have to go out and find. It is already here, closer than our own breath. The only thing between us and that freedom is habit. The old grooves we have worn so deep that we walk them without thinking, without choosing, without even realizing we are walking them at all. Let us explore a story about a tiger. Long ago, in a mountainous province, a powerful lord kept a great menagerie in his palace grounds. He had collected animals from distant regions as symbols of his wealth and authority. Among them was a tiger, captured as a young cat from the forests beyond the eastern mountains. She was enormous and beautiful, with a coat like burnished copper and eyes the color of amber. But her home was a stone courtyard, 12 paces wide and 12 paces long, with high walls and an iron gate. A bare floor. No grass. No trees. Nothing but stone and sky above. For years, the tiger paced that courtyard. Back and forth, the same path, the same 12 steps in one direction, the same 12 steps back. She wore smooth grooves into the stone with her paws. In the early years, she would sometimes stop and lift her head, as if she could smell something on the wind, something from far away. But as the years passed, even that stopped. The pacing became her whole life. The servants who brought her food each morning could hear the rhythm of it before they even reached the gate. It never changed. It never stopped. One of the Lord's stewards, a quiet man who had spent his life caring for the animals, watched the tiger with growing unease. He visited her courtyard every day, and every day he saw the same thing. He could see something in her that the others could not. He saw that her pacing was not restlessness. It was something closer to forgetting. She had forgotten what it felt like to run through tall grass, to drink from a cold stream, to lie in the shade of a forest in the heat of the afternoon. Her world had become 12 paces wide, and she had come to believe that this was all there was. The steward went to his lord and asked permission to build something different for her. He described a walled enclosure on the hillside beyond the palace, several acres of forest with a stream and clearings and tall pines. It took a long time to convince the Lord, and longer still to build it. But eventually, the day came. There was a quiet excitement among the steward and his helpers as they led the tiger to her new home. The morning was cool. Birds were calling in the trees. The steward opened the gate to the enclosure and stepped back. Before her lay everything a tiger could want. Open ground stretching in every direction. Pine trees and birch. A stream that caught the sunlight as it moved over smooth stones. The smell of earth and leaves and wild grass. The tiger stepped through the gate. She stood very still for a moment, her great head turning slowly, taking in this new world. The steward held his breath. One of the younger helpers whispered, "Look, she sees it." And then the tiger walked to the nearest corner, lowered her head, and began to pace. 12 steps in one direction, 12 steps back. The same rhythm, the same path. as if the walls of the old courtyard were still around her, as if the stone floor were still beneath her feet. She did this for the rest of her life, back and forth across a small patch of ground in the corner of a vast and beautiful space she never explored. The grass beneath her pacing feet wore down to bare earth, a narrow strip no wider than the grooves she had worn in the old stone floor. The steward watched from a distance. He did not try to push her or lead her further in. He understood that the walls she paced between were no longer made of stone. They were made of something older and deeper, something she carried inside her. This story has stayed with many Buddhist teachers over the years because it is such an honest picture of how we live. We pace. We walk the same 12 steps, back and forth, in our minds and in our lives, and we do it so automatically that we forget we are doing it. Think of it this way. You have certain thoughts that come around at the same time each day, in the same situations, triggered by the same kinds of events. A particular worry that surfaces every evening. A familiar self-criticism that arrives whenever you make a mistake. A loop of planning that starts the moment you have a quiet moment. These are the grooves in the stone. You did not choose them. You wore them in over years, and now your mind walks them out of pure habit. It happens in relationships too. You find yourself reacting to someone in the same way you have reacted for years, saying the same things, feeling the same frustration or distance, even when part of you knows there is another way. The pattern is so familiar that it runs before you have a chance to choose something different. And afterward, you wonder why it happened again. And just as the tiger could not see the forest around her, we often cannot see the openness that is right here. We are so absorbed in the familiar pattern that we do not notice how much space there actually is. How many other ways we could think, feel, and respond in this moment. The sky above the courtyard was always open. She just never looked up. In Buddhist teaching, this is called samsara. It is often translated as the cycle of suffering, but a simpler way to think of it is going around in circles. It is the way we repeat the same patterns, the same reactions, the same stories about ourselves and others, and end up in the same place we started, wondering why nothing feels different. The Buddha compared it to a wheel that keeps turning. And what keeps the wheel turning is not some outside force. It is our own unawareness. We do not see the pattern, so we cannot step out of it. There is a story about a student who went to a Buddhist teacher and said, "I keep ending up in the same place. I change my circumstances, I move, I start over, but after a while everything feels the same. The same frustrations, the same loneliness. What am I doing wrong?" The teacher said, "Tell me, when you move from one house to another, what do you bring with you?" "Everything," the student said. "My belongings, my furniture, my books." The teacher smiled. "And where do you unpack them?" "In the new house." "And then the new house looks very much like the old one, does it not?" The student was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "It does." "The furniture is not the problem," the teacher said gently. "It is the habit of arranging it in the same way. You bring yourself wherever you go. And until you see the patterns you carry, you will keep setting up the same room in every house you enter." That is what the steward saw in the tiger. She was not being held by the walls anymore. She was being held by a habit so deep it had become invisible to her. And everything she needed was already there, right around her, waiting. There is a helpful way to think about what happens when we are caught inside one of these patterns. Imagine walking along a mountain path on a morning when the fog has come in thick. You can see a few steps ahead of you and nothing more. The trees around you are shapes in the grey. The valley below has disappeared. The sky above is gone. Your whole world has shrunk to this small circle of visibility, and it feels heavy and close, as if this greyness is all there is. If someone told you in that moment that a vast blue sky was right above you, just beyond the fog, you might believe them in theory. But it would be hard to feel it. The fog is so immediate, so total, that it fills your entire experience. And then, as you climb higher, the fog begins to thin. Slowly at first. Light comes through in patches. The grey softens. And then, quite suddenly, you step above the fog line, and there it is. The sky, enormous and clear. The sun warming your face. And below you, the fog is just a thin white layer draped across the valley. From up here, it is no longer something that traps you. It is something you can simply observe. Nothing changed about the sky during the time you were in the fog. It did not go away. It did not shrink. It was there the whole time, exactly as it always is. You just could not see it from where you were standing. This is what Buddhist teachers mean when they say that awareness is always present. Our thoughts, our worries, our habitual reactions, they are like fog. They are real. They are there. Sometimes they are thick enough that we cannot see anything else. But they are never the whole picture. There is always something larger, something clearer, right behind them. And when we begin to notice the fog as fog, rather than mistaking it for the entire world, something opens up. We start to see from a higher place. The Buddha himself said, "Just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so this teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom." Everything in Buddhist wisdom points in this direction. Freedom from the patterns that bind us. Freedom from the fog that obscures our view. And that freedom begins, always, with seeing clearly. So what does this look like in everyday life? The Buddhist tradition offers a simple and useful way to think about it. Thinking, the teachers say, is a wonderful servant but a poor master. When thinking serves us, it is one of the most remarkable abilities we have. A builder imagines a house before the first stone is laid. A healer considers what is causing the illness and what might help. A traveler plans the route before setting out. A parent thinks through how to explain something difficult to a child. In these moments, thought is a tool, and we are the ones using it. We pick it up when we need it and set it down when we are done. There is a lightness to it. We think, we act, and then we move on. But when thinking becomes the master, the feeling is completely different. We are no longer choosing our thoughts. They are choosing us. A worry arrives, and we follow it down one corridor after another, each one leading to a new concern, and before we know it, an hour has passed, and we have been somewhere else entirely, somewhere we never intended to go. A judgment arises about ourselves or someone else, and instead of noticing it and letting it pass, we build a case around it, adding evidence, replaying old memories that support it, until the judgment feels like established truth. You can feel the difference in the body. When thought is serving us, there is a sense of ease. We think about what to cook for dinner. We decide. We move on. But when thought is running us, there is a tightness, a contraction. We are gripping something or being gripped by something, and we cannot quite let go. The body knows the difference even when the mind does not. This is the tiger pacing. This is the fog filling in. We are inside the pattern, and because we are inside it, we cannot see it as a pattern. It just feels like reality. A Zen teacher once put it this way. He said that most people are like someone riding a horse that is galloping wildly, and when a bystander calls out, "Where are you going?" the rider shouts back, "I do not know." Ask the horse. We have all had that feeling, being carried along by a train of thought that we did not choose and do not want, but somehow cannot seem to get off. The thoughts are running, and we are running with them, and it can feel as though we have no say in the matter. The horse has its own ideas about where to go, and we are just holding on. But here is what the Buddhist tradition tells us, and it is good news. The moment you realize you are on the horse, something has already changed. You were lost in the galloping, completely identified with it, and then, for one moment, you woke up. You saw it. You noticed. And in that noticing, you are no longer entirely at the mercy of the ride. You may not be able to stop the horse immediately, but you are no longer asleep in the saddle. You do not have to stop the thoughts. The Buddha was clear about this. You cannot stop the mind from thinking any more than you can stop the wind from blowing. But you can notice. You can see the thought arise, recognize it for what it is, and let it pass through without climbing on and riding wherever it wants to take you. The Zen tradition calls this the backward step. Instead of leaning forward into the next thought, the next worry, the next plan, you step back and simply watch. You become the one who sees, rather than the one who is swept along. It is a small shift, but it changes everything. In the space of that backward step, you discover something that has been true all along. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. You are not the fog. You are the sky through which the fog passes. The tiger never took this step. She could not. But we can. And every time we do, even for a single breath, the courtyard walls grow a little more transparent, and the forest beyond them becomes a little more real. The tiger in the story was given everything she needed. Open ground, fresh water, the shade of tall pines. But she could not receive it because her old habit was too strong. She kept walking the same narrow path because it was the only one she knew. We do this too. We are offered a moment of rest, and the mind fills it with planning. We are offered a kind word, and something in us deflects it. We are offered a quiet evening, and instead of being in it, we spend it reviewing the day or rehearsing tomorrow. The forest is right there, all around us, and we keep pacing the same small square of ground. But there is something the tiger did not have that we do. We can become aware of the pacing. We can see the habit. We can feel the grooves beneath our feet and realize, even just for a breath, that the walls came down a long time ago. And each time we notice, each time we catch ourselves mid-pace and look up, something loosens. The pattern does not disappear overnight. It took years to wear those grooves, and they will not smooth over in a day. But they do not have to. The freedom is not in never pacing again. The freedom is in knowing that we are pacing and knowing that the forest is right there, whenever we are ready to step into it. That realization, quiet as it is where everything begins to change. Let us pause here. Take a breath and let it go slowly. Notice where you are right now, how your body feels, what is present. There is no rush. Whenever you are ready, we will continue. In the Zen tradition, there is a saying, "What you think about a thing is never the thing itself." The thought of water will not quench your thirst. The thought of fire will not warm your hands. And the thought of who you are, that running inner portrait we carry everywhere, is not who you actually are. This is one of the simplest and most freeing ideas in all of Buddhism. It has been explored by teachers for over 2,000 years, and yet it remains as fresh and surprising as the first time someone noticed it. Tonight, we are going to sit with it for a while and see what it opens up. Consider a tree, a real, living tree. Perhaps you have one in mind right now. A tree you have passed many times, one you know well enough to picture clearly. Now notice the difference between the tree in your mind and the tree in the world. The thought of the tree is flat and still. It is made of memory and imagination. It has a rough shape, maybe a color, but it has no weight, no texture, no temperature. It does not move. It does not change. It is more like a sketch than a living thing. The actual tree is something else entirely. Its leaves turn in the wind, showing one shade of green and then another. Its bark is rough under your fingers, cool in the shade, warm where the sun has been resting on it all afternoon. In spring, it smells of blossoms. In autumn, its leaves go gold and red and brown, and they fall one by one, each one finding its own path to the ground. Birds land on its branches and sing and fly away again. Insects move along its bark. Rain collects in the crooks of its limbs. Its roots are reaching deep into the earth in ways you will never see, drawing up water, intertwining with the roots of other trees, part of a network that stretches through the entire forest floor. The thought of the tree captures something. It is a real experience in the mind, but it is a tiny frozen fragment of the living reality. A single still photograph of something that is always moving, always growing, always more than any image could hold. And if you confuse the thought with the tree itself, you would miss almost everything. A great naturalist once wrote something that has stayed with many Buddhist teachers. He said, "If there is a difference between the bird and what the guidebook says, believe the bird. Trust the living thing over the description of it. Trust what is actually here, right now, alive and breathing and changing, over what the mind says is here." This is where the Buddhist teaching on thoughts begins. With this recognition that our thoughts are representations of reality, not reality itself. They point toward things, they describe things, they label and sort and categorize. But the description is never the thing itself, and the story we tell ourselves about our lives is never the full truth of what is actually present in this moment. So what are thoughts, exactly? If you pay attention to them, which is something the Buddhist tradition encourages, you begin to notice that they come in different forms. Some are words, like a voice narrating or commenting. Some are images, still pictures or brief scenes that play out behind the eyes. Some are more like impressions, a vague sense of something without any clear shape, a feeling that has not yet found words. And some seem to live mostly in the body, showing up as tightness or restlessness before any words or images arrive at all. They come uninvited, most of them. You did not sit down and decide to think your next thought. It simply appeared. And then the next one appeared. And the next. They arise on their own, like bubbles rising through water, and they dissolve on their own too, if you let them. The Buddha once compared the mind to a host receiving guests at an inn. The guests come and go. Some are pleasant, some are difficult, but the host does not become the guest. The host remains. The trouble is that most of us do not notice this. We do not see thoughts as guests arriving and departing. We see them as us. We hear the inner voice say something, and we assume it is telling the truth. We feel a flash of anxiety, and we assume it means something is genuinely wrong. We have a critical thought about ourselves, and we accept it the way we might accept the weather. Of course, that is just how it is. But the Buddhist tradition invites us to look more carefully. And when we do, we discover something both simple and surprising. Thoughts are real, but they are not true. What does that mean? It means that the experience of having a thought is real. It is genuinely happening. When you think, "I am not good enough," that thought exists. You can feel its weight. It affects your mood, your body, your choices. It is a real event in the mind and in the body. Nobody is denying that. But is it true? Is it an accurate and complete description of what you are? The Buddhist answer is no. It is one tiny representation, a single brushstroke on a vast canvas. It captures something, perhaps a feeling from childhood, perhaps an echo of something someone once said to you, perhaps a moment of tiredness or disappointment that the mind has turned into a sweeping conclusion. But it leaves out almost everything else. It leaves out every kindness you have shown, every difficulty you have come through, every moment of courage and care that makes up the actual texture of your life. The thought is real, but it is not the whole truth, and it is certainly not the final truth. This applies to all of our thoughts, even the ones that feel most solid and certain. The thought, "This will never get better." Real as an experience, yes. But is it true? How could you possibly know what will or will not change? People recover from things they were sure they would never recover from. Situations shift in ways no one could have predicted. The thought sounds authoritative, but it is guessing. It is projecting the present moment forward into an unknown future and calling it fact. The thought, "That person does not care about me." Real as a feeling. But is it the full picture? You are reading one expression, one moment, one silence, and building an entire story from it. Meanwhile, the other person may be lost in their own fog, their own worries, their own 12-step pacing, and it has nothing at all to do with you. We do this constantly. We take a small piece of experience, wrap it in a thought, and then treat the thought as if it were the complete and final word on the matter. And then we react to the thought rather than to what is actually happening. It is worth noticing that this does not only apply to negative thoughts. We do the same thing with pleasant ones. We meet someone new and think, "This person is wonderful. They are exactly what I have been looking for." And we are reacting to a thought, an image we have created, rather than to the actual person sitting in front of us, who is far more complex and surprising than any first impression could capture. In time, when they inevitably turn out to be a real human being and not the image we had constructed, we feel disappointed. But the disappointment is not really about them. It is about the gap between the thought and the reality. This is what the Buddhist tradition is pointing to. Thoughts are useful. They help us navigate, but they are always simplified, always incomplete, always slightly behind or ahead of what is actually happening in this living moment. When we know this, when we carry this understanding gently with us, we hold our thoughts a little more lightly. We listen to them without being governed by them. We let them inform us without letting them imprison us. And that makes all the difference. There is a story from the Zen tradition that brings this teaching to life. A man traveled a long way to a monastery in the mountains to study with a Buddhist teacher who was known for his directness. The teacher had a reputation for cutting through confusion quickly, without long lectures or elaborate explanations. People said that a few minutes with him could untangle what years of thinking had knotted. The man arrived at the monastery after several days of walking. He was tired, and he was carrying more than just the weight of the journey. He had a fierce temper that had caused him trouble his whole life. It would rise up without warning, hot and sudden, and by the time it passed, the damage was done. He had hurt people he cared about. He had broken things that could not be repaired. And he felt, deep down, that this was simply who he was. He had been this way as a child, and he was this way now, and he would always be this way. It was in his nature, built into him, as permanent as the bones beneath his skin. He was brought to the teacher, who was sitting quietly in a small courtyard near the main hall. The man bowed and sat down across from him. "I have come because I need help," he said. "I have a terrible temper. It was born in me. I have had it as long as I can remember. It rises up and takes over, and afterward I feel ashamed, but I cannot stop it. Please, can you help me?" The teacher looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "This temper of yours, I would like to see it. Show it to me right now." The man blinked. "Well, I do not have it right now. It comes and goes. Right now I feel calm. So it comes and goes," the teacher said. "Yes. And right now it is not here." "No. Right now I feel fine. So where is it?" The man opened his mouth and then closed it again. He searched inside himself, looking for the anger, the familiar heat. He could not find it. It was like looking for a fire that had already burned out. There were ashes, perhaps, but no flame. "I suppose it is nowhere right now," he said. "If it were truly born in you," the teacher said, "if it were truly part of your nature, it would be here all the time. Like your heartbeat, like your breathing. You would not be able to set it down. But you tell me it comes and goes. It arises when certain conditions are present, and it dissolves when those conditions pass. This means it is not what you are. It is something that passes through you." The man sat with this for a long time. The courtyard was quiet. Somewhere beyond the wall, he could hear birds in the trees and the sound of the wind. "Then what am I?" he asked, finally. The teacher's eyes were kind. "You are what is here when the temper is not." This story gets at the heart of what the Buddha was pointing to. We believe our thoughts and feelings so completely that we build our entire identity around them. I am an angry person. I am anxious. I am someone who always struggles. We say these things as if they are permanent facts about our nature. But the Zen teacher's question cuts through all of that. "Can you show it to me right now?" And when we look, honestly and openly, we often cannot find the thing we were so sure defined us. The anger is not present in this moment. The anxiety is not here right now, in this breath. The sense of not being enough, where is it exactly? Right now. These experiences are real when they arise. They are vivid and powerful, but they are not permanent fixtures. They come and go, and what remains when they pass is something much larger, much quieter, and much more fundamentally you than any passing storm could be. In Buddhism, this is sometimes called your original face. The face you had before you began to tell stories about yourself. Before the opinions and the worries and the self-judgment started piling up. There is something underneath all of that. Something that was here before the first thought arose this morning and will still be here after the last one fades tonight. It is awareness itself. Open, undamaged, and always present. It is the sky. There is a freedom that comes from understanding this. When you know that a thought is a thought, you are no longer trapped inside it. You can feel it arise. You can notice what it says, and you can let it pass through without it defining you or dictating your next move. The thought, "I am failing," can come, and you can recognize it as a familiar visitor. It is real. You feel it. But you do not have to rearrange your life around it, because you know it is not the whole truth. It is one cloud crossing the sky. An important cloud, perhaps. One worth noticing. But it is not the sky. The Buddhist teacher who worked with the man and his temper was not trying to get rid of the temper. He was not saying that anger is bad, or that the man was wrong for feeling it. He was saying something much simpler and much kinder. You are bigger than this. You are the awareness in which the temper arises and falls away. You are the space in which the storm happens. And that space has never once been damaged by anything that has passed through it. Imagine for a moment what that would feel like. To have a worried thought arrive, and instead of immediately following it, instead of climbing onto it and riding it wherever it wants to go, you simply recognize it. Oh, there is worry. It is here. And you stay where you are. You stay in the awareness, in the sky, and you watch the cloud drift through. It may be dark. It may be large. But it moves. Everything moves. And you remain. This is not something you have to force or manufacture. It is something you can discover again and again, simply by noticing. Each time you catch a thought and see it for what it is, a representation and not the reality itself, you have stepped out of the guidebook and into the presence of the living bird. This does not mean we ignore our thoughts or pretend they do not exist. Zen Buddhism is very clear about this. Thoughts are not the enemy. They are part of being alive. They carry information. They can point us toward things that matter. A thought of compassion can move us to help someone. A thought of caution can keep us safe. The point is not to silence the mind. The point is to stop mistaking the commentary for the event itself. The bird is not the guidebook. The tree is not the photograph. And you are not the voice in your head. You are something far more open, far more alive, and far less troubled than any thought has ever suggested. Take a moment here. Let your breathing settle. Notice what is present right now, underneath whatever thoughts may be passing through. There is something quiet there. It has always been there. And whenever you are ready, we will continue on together. The Buddha once said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts." Let us stay here for a while, with thinking, with the quiet, restless, endlessly busy mind that so many of us carry with us into bed each night. Let us take a walk together through a forest. Imagine a path through old trees. The ground is soft beneath your feet, covered in fallen leaves and moss. The air smells of earth and bark and something green and living. Branches arch overhead, filtering the light into patterns on the ground. A stream runs somewhere nearby. You can hear it but not see it. Birds call in the distance, then go silent. It is peaceful here. You walk slowly. There is no hurry. The path curves gently between the trunks. Some of the trees are very old, their roots rising out of the ground like the knuckles of ancient hands. Some are younger, slender, still finding their way toward the light. Each one is different. Each one is simply being what it is. Now imagine something strange. Imagine that each tree you pass has a voice. Not a loud voice, more like a murmur, a running commentary. And as you walk along the path, you can hear what each tree is thinking about itself. The first tree you pass is a tall one with a wide trunk. She is feeling rather good about herself. "Look at this trunk," she murmurs. "Solid, broad, the kind of trunk other trees notice." The next tree over is not feeling so well. He is thinner and his bark is rough and peeling in places. "Look at me," he mutters. "The others all have such smooth bark, such straight branches. I have always been like this. Something must be wrong with me." A little further along the path, you hear a tree worrying about the weather. "There was frost last night," she whispers. "What if the cold comes earlier this year? What if my roots are not deep enough?" Just past her, another tree is fuming. "That oak," he grumbles, leaning slightly as if pointing. "Every year he spreads out a little more. Every year he takes more of my sunlight. It is not fair. I was here first." And nearby, a young tree with slender branches has been watching the old maple across the clearing. "Every morning the birds come to her," she sighs. "They sing in her branches for hours. They never visit me." On and on it goes. Each tree you pass is running some version of the same thing, a story about itself. What is wrong? What is missing? What might go wrong next? Who has more? Who has less? Now take a breath, and with the exhale, feel the relief. When you walk through a real forest, this is not what happens. Trees do not compare themselves to other trees. They do not worry about next winter in the middle of summer. They do not replay old storms. They simply stand where they are, growing quietly in whatever light they receive. But we are not so fortunate. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, we have not yet learned what the trees seem to already know. When we walk through our own lives, something very much like that forest is happening all the time. There is a voice in our heads. It narrates, it judges, it compares, it plans, it worries, it replays conversations, it rehearses future ones. It runs all day and well into the night. For some of us, it is the last thing we hear before we fall asleep and the first thing we hear when we wake up. We live inside a kind of movie, and the main character in this movie is always us. Everyone else is a supporting player. The neighbor, the colleague, the stranger in the shop. Everything that happens is filtered through one question: what does this mean for me? Most of the time, we do not even realize the movie is playing. We do not see it as a story. We experience it as reality. When the voice says, "You should not have said that," we feel the sting of regret as if it is happening now, even though the conversation ended hours ago. When the voice says, "What if this does not work out?" we feel the weight of a future that has not arrived and may never arrive. The narration is so constant and so familiar that we mistake it for the truth. We mistake the map for the territory, the menu for the meal. There is a difference between thinking about your life and actually being in your life. One is made of words and images and memories stitched together into a story. The other is the warmth of the blanket against your skin right now, the sound of this voice, the rise and fall of your own breathing. The two feel very different once you begin to notice. This is simply what minds do. Minds produce thoughts the way a spring produces water. It is their nature, and for good reason. Thinking helped our ancestors survive. It helped them plan, solve problems, remember dangers, and pass on what they learned. Without thought, none of the good things in human life would exist. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The tool started running on its own, and we stopped noticing that it was running. Whole hours pass, whole days sometimes, and we do not realize that we have been living inside the narration rather than inside our actual lives. We think we are present, but much of the time, we are somewhere else entirely, watching the movie. These thoughts are also remarkably repetitive. The same worries come around again and again, the same judgments, the same small loops of planning and replaying. Most of what the mind produces today, it produced yesterday. And the day before that. It is a bit like setting out on a long journey through empty countryside, and just before the road opens up, you pass a sign that reads, "You and your own familiar thoughts, the next 500 miles." It can feel like a strange kind of company. Familiar, relentless, and not always kind. And even at night, when the body is ready to rest, the mind often keeps going. It replays the day. It rehearses tomorrow. It digs up something from last week that was nearly forgotten and presents it again, fresh and urgent, as if it had just happened. The body is lying still, but the mind is pacing back and forth, like something caged. And yet, because this is so familiar, we rarely question it. We rarely stop and ask, is this thought even true? Is it taking me somewhere I want to go? We just let it run, the way you might let a radio play in the background until you forget it is on. The music becomes the room. The thoughts become the world. There is an old Zen story about this. A young man traveled a long way through the mountains to study with an old teacher who lived alone in a small hermitage above a valley. It had taken him 3 days on foot. He had heard that this teacher was wise and that he spoke simply, which was what the young man wanted, because he had already read many books and none of them had helped. The young man was restless. His mind gave him no peace. He arrived tired and dusty from the road, and the teacher invited him in and offered him a seat on the floor. The hermitage was small and clean. There was a low table, a mat for sleeping, a shelf with a few jars, and a window that looked out over the valley below. "Please," the young man said, "I need your help. My mind will not stop. Every day it is the same. Worries and plans and regrets and fears, one after another. I have tried to push the thoughts away, but they come back stronger. I have tried to force my mind to be still, but it only becomes louder. What should I do?" The old teacher did not answer right away. He was preparing tea, moving slowly, and he continued what he was doing as if he had all the time in the world. When the tea was ready, he set a cup before his guest. "Drink," he said. "You have come a long way." The young man drank, but he was impatient. He wanted an answer. The teacher stood, walked to the doorway, and picked up a glass jar from his shelf. He took it outside to the stream that ran past the hermitage. The young man watched from the doorway as the teacher knelt by the water and scooped the jar along the bottom where the current stirred the silt. When he brought it back inside, the water in the jar was cloudy and brown. He set the jar on the low table between them. "Tell me what you see," the teacher said. "Muddy water," the young man replied. "And what would you like to see?" "Clear water." "Very well," said the teacher. "Go ahead and make it clear." The young man looked at the jar. He reached forward and shook it gently, trying to separate the mud from the water. But of course, the shaking only made it worse. The water grew darker. He tried swirling it slowly. Still cloudy. He tilted the jar this way and that. Nothing changed. He looked up at the teacher. "I cannot do it." The old man smiled. "No," he said. "You cannot. And that is exactly the point." He took a sip of tea. "Now set the jar down. Leave it alone. And sit with me." So the young man set the jar down, and they sat together in the quiet of the hermitage. The teacher drank his tea. The young man sat with his hands in his lap, glancing now and then at the jar. And slowly, without anyone doing anything at all, the mud began to settle. Grain by grain, particle by particle, it drifted down through the water. The water above it grew lighter, clearer, and after some time, the water was perfectly still and perfectly transparent, and all the mud rested in a thin layer at the bottom. The teacher set down his cup and nodded toward the jar. "Did you do anything to make that happen?" "No," the young man said quietly. "The water was never broken," the teacher said. "The clarity was always there. It was only hidden by what had been stirred up, and the moment you stopped stirring, it returned on its own." He paused and looked at his student kindly. "Your mind is like this water. The peace you are searching for is already here, underneath all the stirring. You do not need to create it or earn it or force it into being. Your only task, and it is a gentle one, is to stop reaching in and shaking the jar." The young man stayed at the hermitage for several days after that. He did not receive many more teachings. The teacher did not give long lectures or assign difficult practices. Mostly they sat together, or walked in the mountains, or prepared meals in silence. And what the young man began to notice, slowly, was that when he stopped trying so hard to fix his mind, it began to settle on its own. Gradually, imperfectly, the way the mud settled in the jar, grain by grain, without any help. Years later, when he was asked what he had learned from the old teacher, he said, "He taught me that the water was never broken." The teacher in that story understood something the Buddha had taught centuries before him. The mind, left to its old habits, has a kind of gravity. It sinks toward worry. This is an inheritance. Long ago, the minds that worried were the minds that survived. In a world of real physical danger, the mind that assumed the rustle in the bushes was harmless did not last long. The mind that assumed danger, the mind that thought, "I had better pay attention to that," was the mind that made it through. So we inherited its tendencies. A mind that scans for problems. A mind that holds onto the one difficult experience and lets 100 peaceful ones slip by without notice. You can see this in any ordinary day. Perhaps you had a conversation with someone and it went well. You laughed together. You felt connected. But near the end, they said one small thing that landed strangely. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe they were tired. But what does the mind do with that? It circles back to it. While the warm parts of the conversation fade quietly into the background, that one small moment replays and replays, and you find yourself wondering what they really meant. One moment, out of hundreds, and the mind treats it as the one that matters most. This is the gravity the Buddha was pointing to. The mind does not do this on purpose. It does not mean harm. It is simply following the old instructions it was given long ago. Stay alert. Watch for danger. Do not let your guard down. And so it pulls us, again and again, toward the thought that feels most urgent, most threatening, most in need of solving. Even when there is nothing to solve. Even when we are lying safely in bed and the day is done. And what makes this pattern so powerful is that our thoughts do not stay in the mind. They spread into the body. A worried thought creates tension in the shoulders, a knot in the stomach, a shallow quickening of the breath. And those sensations, in turn, signal the mind that something must be wrong. So it searches for more reasons to worry. And it finds them. And the cycle continues. Thought feeding feeling, feeling feeding thought, around and around, sometimes for hours, sometimes for years. The Buddha noticed this tendency and he pointed to something simple but important. He said, "Whatever a person frequently thinks and reflects on, that will become the inclination of their mind." In other words, the thoughts we repeat most often are not just passing visitors. They shape the room we live in. They set the temperature. They color the light. The teachers who came after him explored this further. They noticed that even a single word, held quietly in the mind, could shift the whole body. When the word trouble rests in someone's awareness, even briefly, the body responds. There is a tightening, a heaviness. The mind begins reaching for reasons. It pulls up old concerns and presents them as if they are urgent. But when that word dissolves and is replaced by something like kindness, the body responds to that too. There is a softening, a warmth. Something loosens in the chest. Nothing in that person's life has changed between those two words. Only the thought changed. And with it, the entire inner world shifted. This is how much quiet power the mind holds. It cannot change what happens to us, but it shapes how we experience what happens to us. And that changes everything. And there is something else the teachers noticed. When a kind thought rests in the mind, the worried thoughts are simply not there. Nobody fought them or pushed them out. Attention turned towards something gentler, and the clouds quietly parted, and the sky was right there. It was always right there, just as the clear water was always there, beneath the mud, just as the sky is always there, above the clouds. This is where we begin tonight, simply noticing the voices in the forest, noticing the flavor of the thoughts that pass through, and then, gently, setting the jar down, The sky behind the clouds has never gone anywhere. It is wide and open and undisturbed by anything that passes through it. The clouds come and the clouds go. Some are light, some are dark. Some stay for a long time, but the sky remains. It has always remained. The clarity was always there underneath. It was only ever hidden, never lost. And now the mud is settling. The water is clearing. There is nothing you need to do to help it along. Let us rest here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now, just as you are. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Some thoughts pass through quickly. They arrive, they brush against us, and they are gone. But others stay. They set up camp. They weave themselves so deeply into our sense of who we are that we stop seeing them as thoughts at all. We see them as facts, as the truth about ourselves, as the ground we stand on. In Buddhism, these are called beliefs, and they are among the most powerful forces in human life. A passing thought might say, "I wonder if I said the wrong thing at dinner." It comes, it stings a little, and it fades. But a belief says something different. A belief says, "I always say the wrong thing. I am the kind of person who does not know how to be around people." That is not a passing visitor. That is a wall. And some of us have been living inside walls like that for so long that we have forgotten they are there. Tonight, we look at these walls, and we discover something surprising about what happens when we examine them closely. There is a teaching in Buddhism that traces how beliefs shape an entire life. It goes like this: our beliefs give rise to our thoughts. Our thoughts give rise to our actions. Our actions, repeated over time, form our character, and our character becomes our destiny. It means that the stories we carry about ourselves, the deep ones, the ones we rarely question, are quietly shaping everything. How we speak to the people we love, what we attempt and what we avoid, how much joy we allow ourselves, how much closeness we let in. All of it traces back, eventually, to a handful of beliefs that took root long ago and have been running the show ever since. And here is what makes beliefs different from ordinary thoughts. They feel true in the body. A passing worry sits on the surface. A belief lives in the bones. When someone carries the belief, "I am not lovable," it is not an idea floating around in the head. It is a heaviness in the chest, a contraction in the stomach, a way of holding the shoulders. The body has absorbed it. The body believes it too. That is why beliefs are so much harder to see through than ordinary thoughts. With an ordinary thought, you can name it and let it go, as we explored earlier. But a belief resists that. It says, "This is not a thought. This is the truth. This is just how things are." And because it feels so real, so physical, so woven into the fabric of daily life, we tend to agree. Buddhist teachers offer a simple way to spot a belief that may be causing quiet harm. Look for the word should. I should be further along by now. I should have figured this out. I should be stronger, calmer, more successful, more together. They should treat me differently. Life should not be this hard. Whenever should appears, a belief is at work. And And what the word should really means is reality is wrong. Things are not as they ought to be. It is an argument with what is. And arguments with what is, as any Buddhist teacher will gently point out, are arguments we cannot win. Not because we are weak, but because reality is already here. It has already arrived. The moment has already taken this shape. And standing inside it, insisting it should be different, creates a particular kind of suffering, a tightness, a frustration, a feeling of swimming against a current that will not change direction, no matter how hard we swim. You can feel this in small ways every day. You should not be stuck in this situation. Your body should feel better than it does. That conversation should have gone differently. Each should is a small fist clenching around something that has already happened, trying to reshape it by sheer force of will. And each one leaves you a little more tired, a little more tense, a little further from the peace that is always available right here in what actually is. This does not mean we should accept everything passively or never try to improve our lives. The Buddhist path is full of intention and care and effort. But there is a difference between working with what is here and arguing against it. One moves with the current. The other exhausts itself pushing against it. And the beliefs underneath our should statements, the ones about our worth, our lovability, our fundamental okayness, these are often the oldest and deepest walls we carry. They were built long ago, usually in childhood, when we did not have the words to question them or the perspective to see around them. A child does not think, this is a belief I am forming that may or may not be accurate. A child simply absorbs the feeling and builds a world around it. I am not safe here. I am too much. I am not enough. Something is wrong with me. And those walls have been standing ever since, shaping everything, while we walk back and forth inside them without even knowing they are there. There is a story from the Zen tradition that goes to the heart of this. Long ago, in the mountains of northern China, there lived a Buddhist teacher of great reputation. He had spent decades in solitary practice, and it was said that his understanding was profound. He lived in a cave high above a valley, and the path to reach him was steep and treacherous, especially in winter. One winter, during a heavy snowfall, a young man arrived at the mouth of the cave. He had traveled for many weeks to find this teacher. He stood outside in the falling snow and called out, asking to be received as a student. The teacher did not answer. The young man waited. Snow gathered on his shoulders, on his head, in the folds of his robes. The cold was severe. Hours passed. Still no answer came from inside the cave. By the following morning, the snow had risen to his knees. His body was shaking. His hands had gone numb. But he did not leave. He stood there through the second day and into the second night, and still the teacher said nothing. On the third morning, the teacher finally appeared at the mouth of the cave. He was older than the young man had expected. His face was deeply lined, and he moved slowly, but his eyes were clear and alert. He looked at the young man, who was nearly frozen, standing in snow that had risen past his knees, and said, "Why are you still here?" "Because I am suffering," the young man said. His voice was hoarse. "My mind is in turmoil. I have no peace. I have traveled a long way because I heard that you understand these things. I have tried everything I know, and nothing has worked. I am asking you, please, to help me find peace." The teacher studied him for a long moment. Something in the young man's face seemed to satisfy him. He stepped aside and let him enter. Inside, the cave was simple and warm. A small fire burned against one wall. There was a mat on the ground and a single blanket and a few clay cups. The walls were smooth stone, and the firelight made them glow with a soft amber color. The teacher gave the young man tea and wrapped the blanket around his shoulders and let him warm himself. They sat together in silence for a long time. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the wind outside. Finally, the young man spoke again. "Please," he said, "my mind is restless. Every day it tells me I am not enough. Every night it replays my mistakes. I have carried this for as long as I can remember, and I am so tired of it. Will you pacify my mind for me?" The teacher looked at him steadily. "Bring me your mind," he said, "and I will pacify it." The young man was taken aback. "Bring you my mind?" "Yes." "Find it. Bring it to me. Show me this restless mind that torments you, and I will set it at ease." The young man closed his eyes. He searched. He went looking for the turmoil, the agitation, the thing that had driven him all this way through the snow. He looked for it the way you might look for an object you misplaced, turning over every corner of his inner experience. Where was it? Where was this mind that would not be still? He found thoughts, but they were just thoughts. They came and went. None of them was the mind itself. He found feelings, tiredness, relief, a lingering chill in his fingers. But none of these was the restless mind he had described. He found memories of suffering, but they were memories. They were not happening now. He searched and searched. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. Finally, he opened his eyes. "I have searched everywhere," he said quietly. "I cannot find it." The teacher smiled. "There," he said, "I have pacified it for you." This story has been told and retold across Zen Buddhism for centuries, and the reason it endures is that it captures something essential about the nature of our deepest suffering. The things that torment us most, the beliefs about who we are, the convictions about what is wrong with us, they feel so real, so solid, so permanent, that we are certain they must be fixed features of our inner landscape. We organize our entire lives around them. We make choices based on them. We avoid things because of them. We hold back from people because of them. And yet, when we turn to face them directly, with honest and gentle attention, they often cannot be found. Not because they are not real experiences. They are. But because they are not what we think they are. They are not solid walls. They are more like shadows that depend on a certain angle of light. Change the angle, and they shift. Look at them directly, and they lose their shape. The young man in the cave was sure his suffering was a thing, an object, something with location and permanence. He could describe it in great detail. He could list its effects. He could tell you how long he had carried it. But when he went looking for it, really looking, all he found were passing experiences. Thoughts that came and went. Feelings that rose and fell. Memories that flickered and faded. Nothing permanent. Nothing solid enough to hold in his hands and say, "Here, this is it. This is the source." And in that not finding, something opened up. The very act of searching honestly, without assumption, dissolved the problem he had come to solve. He did not need to fix his mind. He did not need to add anything to it or take anything away. He needed to see that the thing he was trying to fix did not exist in the way he had believed it did. This is one of the most liberating insights in all of Zen Buddhism. We spend so much energy trying to solve problems that, when examined closely, turn out to be made of thought rather than substance. The suffering is real. The experience is real. But the solid, permanent, unchangeable thing we thought was causing it, it cannot be found. There is a question that Buddhist teachers sometimes offer to people who are caught in a painful belief. It is a simple question, but it reaches very deep. The question is, who would you be without this belief? Consider it gently. If you carry the belief that you are not good enough, who would you be if that belief simply was not there? Not if you proved it wrong or argued it away, but if it genuinely was not present. What would your body feel like? What would your morning feel like? How would you walk through a room full of people? If you carry the belief that you will always be alone, who would you be without it? If that story simply dissolved, like mist in the morning sun, what would remain? Most people, when they sit with this question honestly, discover something moving. They find an openness, a lightness, a sense of being part of things, connected, alive, without the wall between them and the world. They describe it in simple ways. I would breathe more easily. I would take up less effort. I would feel like I belonged. I would enjoy things more. I would be kinder to myself. And notice what they do not say. Nobody says, I would be someone else entirely. Nobody says I would lose myself. The fear is often that without our familiar beliefs, even the painful ones, we would not know who we are. But the opposite turns out to be true. Without the belief, what remains is more truly us than the belief ever was. The belief was a lens we were looking through. Take the lens away, and you do not lose your eyes. You see more clearly. And then comes the most important part of the teaching. That openness, that lightness, that sense of belonging. It is not something you have to create. It is what is already here, underneath the belief. The belief was not protecting you from the truth. It was hiding the truth from you. And the truth, as it turns out, is far kinder than anything the belief ever told you. This is what the young man in the cave discovered. He went looking for his suffering, and he found, underneath it, a peace that had been there all along. He did not create it. He did not earn it. He simply stopped covering it up. The Buddha taught that we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. Our beliefs filter everything. They color every experience before we even have a chance to meet it fresh. And when a belief is painful, when it tells us we are not enough or that we are fundamentally flawed, it colors everything with that pain. Every conversation, every relationship, every quiet moment alone is seen through that lens. But lenses can be set down. Walls can become transparent. The shadows that seem so solid in the dim light turn out to be weightless when the sun comes in. This is what the great Zen teachers were pointing to when they asked their students to look directly at the mind. They were not asking them to think harder or analyze more cleverly. They were inviting them to look with fresh eyes and see what is actually there. And what is actually there, when we look honestly, is much simpler and much gentler than what we feared. There is awareness. There is presence. There is this moment, just as it is, and there is room in it for everything, including all the beliefs and stories and fears that once seemed so permanent. They can float here too. They do not have to be fought or destroyed. They just have to be seen for what they are. Visitors, shadows, clouds passing through an open sky. The young man in the cave went looking for his troubled mind and could not find it. What he found instead was something quiet, something spacious, something at peace. It had been there all along, underneath the turmoil, waiting to be noticed. It had been there before the first belief took hold, and it would be there long after the last one dissolved. It is here now, too, underneath whatever you carry, underneath whatever walls you have built and whatever stories you have told yourself about who you are. There is something that was never troubled by any of it, something that has always been whole, and it is closer than you think. Rest here for a moment. Let your body soften. There is nothing to figure out, nothing to fix. Just this breath, and then the next one. We will continue when you are ready. The Buddha left home. This is one of the first things we learn about his life. He had a palace, a family, comfort, safety. And one day, he walked away from all of it because he sensed that something essential was missing. He went looking for it in the forests, in the teachings of others, in years of discipline and wandering. And what he eventually discovered was that the thing he had been searching for had never been somewhere else. It had been with him the whole time. This is a pattern that runs through all of Buddhist teaching. We leave home, we go searching, and the path back is not a path to somewhere new. It is a return to what was always here. Tonight, we explore what it means to leave home and what it means to find our way back. There is an ancient story about a man who had two sons. They lived together on a large estate in a fertile valley, and the family had everything it needed. The land provided well. The house was warm. The father loved both his sons, and they knew it. But the younger son was restless. He felt a pull towards something beyond the valley, beyond the life he knew. He could not name it exactly, but it was a feeling that there must be more, that the real life, the exciting one, the one that would finally make him feel complete, was happening somewhere else. One day he went to his father and said, "Give me my share of what is mine. I want to go." The father looked at him for a long time. He did not argue. He did not try to convince him to stay. He divided the estate and gave his younger son his portion. And the young man packed his things and left. He traveled far. He crossed rivers and mountain passes and arrived in distant cities where nobody knew his name. And for a while, it was thrilling. He spent freely. He surrounded himself with people who enjoyed his generosity. He tasted new foods, saw new places, wore fine clothes, and lived the kind of life he had imagined during all those restless evenings back home. He felt, for the first time, like he was truly living. But there was a hollowness to it that he tried not to notice. Each pleasure satisfied for a moment and then faded, and the next one had to be a little bigger, a little more vivid, to produce the same feeling. He was spending faster than he realized. Not just his money, but his energy, his attention, his sense of who he was. The people around him were drawn to his generosity, not to him. He could feel the difference, even if he did not want to admit it. And then the money ran out. It always does when it is being used to fill something that money cannot fill. The friends disappeared with it, and the young man found himself alone in a foreign country with nothing. He took work where he could find it. He ended up in the fields, doing the lowest labor available, hungry and exhausted, surrounded by strangers who did not care whether he lived or starved. And in that emptiness, something shifted. He sat one evening at the edge of a field, looking out at the flat horizon, and he thought, "The workers in my father's house eat better than this. They have shelter and dignity. And here I am, far from everything I knew, with nothing to show for it." It was not a grand realization. It was a quiet one. Just a man sitting in the dust, finally honest with himself. "I will go home," he said. "I will go to my father and tell him I do not deserve to be called his son. I will ask only to work as a servant." So he began the long walk back. And here is the part of the story that has stayed with people for thousands of years. His father saw him coming from a long way off. He had been watching the road, perhaps for years. And when he recognized his son in the distance, thin and ragged and slow, he did not wait. He ran to meet him. He put his arms around him and held him. The son began his prepared speech. "I am not worthy. I do not deserve to be called your son." But the father was not interested in any of that. He called for clean clothes, for food, for a celebration. "My son was lost," he said, "and now he is found." This story exists in many forms across many cultures because it describes something universal. We all leave home. We all go searching for the thing that will make us feel whole, and we look for it in places where it cannot be found. In Buddhism, this is called wanting mind. It is the part of us that believes happiness is somewhere else. If I can just get this job, this relationship, this achievement, this recognition, then I will feel complete. If I can just fix this problem, reach this goal, acquire this thing, then I can finally relax. There is always a then. And the then keeps moving further away, like a horizon line that recedes as you walk toward it. Wanting mind is not a flaw. It is deeply human. It is the energy that drives us to grow, to explore, to build, to create. The Buddha did not say that wanting itself is the problem. He said that clinging is the problem. The difference is important. You can want something and hold it lightly, reaching for it with an open hand. Or you can want something and grip it tightly, building your entire sense of self around getting it. The first is natural. The second is a trap. The younger son in the story was not a bad person for leaving. He was searching. He was doing what all of us do in our own ways, every day. We chase after substitutes, hoping they will deliver the feeling we are looking for. A little more comfort, a little more approval, a little more security, a little more control. And each substitute satisfies for a while, and then the wanting returns, because the hunger was never really about the thing we were chasing. It was about something deeper, something the thing could never provide. The Buddha saw this clearly. He called it the root of suffering. Not wanting itself, but the confusion about what we are really wanting. We think we want the promotion, and what we really want is to feel valued. We think we want the relationship, and what we really want is to feel safe. We think we want the achievement, and what we really want is to rest, to stop striving, to feel, finally, that we are enough as we are. There is a story from the Zen tradition that captures this with a single beautiful image. A monk lived alone in a small hut at the foot of a mountain. He had been there for many years. He owned almost nothing: a mat to sleep on, a worn robe, a bowl for his rice, a few books of Buddhist scripture that he had long since memorized. His life was simple and quiet. He woke before dawn, sat in meditation, tended a small garden, and spent the rest of his hours in study and silence. One night, while the monk was out walking in the hills, as he sometimes did when the moon was bright, a thief crept into his hut. The thief had heard that a holy man lived at the foot of the mountain and assumed, as people often do, that holiness came with hidden wealth. Perhaps gold coins tucked under the floorboards. Perhaps silk or jade. He searched every corner. He opened every container. He looked under the mat and behind the books and in the folds of the blanket. There was nothing to take. The hut was almost completely empty. The thief was crouching in the middle of the room, frustrated and embarrassed, when the monk returned. The monk stood in the doorway. He saw the thief, and his face showed no anger. If anything, it showed concern. "You have come a long way," he said gently, "and you must be disappointed. I am sorry I have so little. But you should not leave here with nothing." He unfastened his robe, the only one he had, and held it out. "Please, take this. It is all I can offer." The thief stared at him. He had broken into this man's home, and the man was offering him his clothes. He did not know what to say or do. After a long, strange moment, he took the robe, tucked it under his arm, and hurried out into the night without looking back. The monk watched him disappear down the path. Then he sat down in the doorway of his hut, bare-skinned in the cool night air, and looked up. The moon was full and bright, hanging low over the mountain, filling the entire valley with silver light. The pine trees cast long shadows. The stream nearby caught the moonlight and held it. He smiled quietly and whispered, "Poor fellow. I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." The thief in that story is all of us when we are caught in wanting mind. He is looking for something he can carry away, something he can hold in his hands, something with weight and shape that he can call his own. And the monk is what we are when we stop looking in the wrong places and notice what is already here. The moon cannot be stolen. It cannot be wrapped up and taken home. And yet, it is the most valuable thing in the scene. It is freely available, shining on everyone equally, and it will be there long after the robe has worn out and been thrown away. What the monk possessed was not a thing. It was a way of seeing, a way of being present to what is here, right now, without needing it to be different. And that is something no one can take from you, because it is not something you have. It is something you are. There is a story about a man who spent his life traveling between villages, helping to resolve disputes and bring people together. He had a gift for it. He could sit with two people who were angry at each other and find the place where their interests met. He was respected, and he was needed. There was always another conflict, another meeting, another long journey on foot to a village that was waiting for his help. And inside him, underneath the purpose and the busyness, there was a constant hum. Do more. Do more. If you stop, things will fall apart. If you rest, you will fall behind. You have not done enough yet. He came to a Buddhist teacher during a period when the hum had grown so loud he could barely hear anything else. He was tired in a way that rest could not fix. His body ached from the traveling. His mind ached from the endless solving. He felt stretched thin, used up, and yet the voice kept saying, "Do more." The teacher listened to all of this patiently. When the man finished, the teacher asked him a simple question. "What is the wanting?" The man did not understand at first. "You want to do more," the teacher said. "You want to accomplish more. You want to help more. Fine. But what is underneath that? If you could do everything you wanted to do, if you could accomplish it all, every last task, what would you get to feel?" The man sat with this. It was not a question anyone had asked him before. He had always focused on the doing, never on what the doing was in service of. The doing was the point, or so he had always assumed. "I think," he said slowly, "I would get to relax. I would get to feel like I had done enough, like I could stop and just be present with the people I care about." "And what would that feel like?" the teacher asked. The man closed his eyes. Something softened in his face. "It would feel like peace, like I could just love the people around me without always needing to prove something. Like I could sit still and not feel guilty about it." "So what you really want," the teacher said, "is to relax into loving. And you believe that if you do enough, you will earn the right to feel that way." The man was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Yes, that is exactly what I believe. What if you do not need to earn it?" The teacher said. "What if it is already here and the doing is what keeps you from noticing?" This was not easy for the man to hear. His whole life had been built around the belief that rest had to be earned. That peace was something you arrived at after enough effort, like a village at the end of a long road. But the teacher kept returning him to the same question. "What do you really want?" And each time, underneath the wanting, he found the same thing. A longing to feel at home. A longing to belong. A longing to rest in something that did not depend on his performance or his usefulness. And slowly, over time, he began to sense that the longing itself was the doorway. By feeling it directly, instead of running from it by doing more, he could touch the very thing he had been searching for. It was not out there, in the next village, the next success, the next problem solved. It was here, in the tender ache of wanting to come home. The longing was not the obstacle. It was the compass. The younger son in the ancient story turned around when he finally let himself feel what he actually felt. Not the shame, not the plan, not the rehearsed speech about worthiness. Just the raw longing underneath all of it. "I want to go home. I miss belonging. I miss being known." And the moment he turned toward home, his father was already running to meet him. In Buddhism, there is a teaching that what we long for is also longing for us. Awareness wants to be recognized. Peace wants to be felt. The wholeness at the center of things is not passive or distant. It is here, right now, waiting, the way the Father watched the road. We do not have to arrive perfectly. We do not have to have it all figured out. The younger son came home in rags, with a speech about not being worthy. And his father did not care about any of that. He did not ask for an explanation or a list of lessons learned. He saw his son, and he ran to meet him. The monk in the story gave away his only robe because he understood that what truly mattered could never be given away or taken. The man who traveled between villages discovered that the peace he was working so hard to earn was already present, waiting underneath the effort. Whatever you have been chasing, whatever substitute you have been reaching for, you can set it down. You can stop walking away from home and simply turn around. The moon is already shining. It has been shining the whole time, and it is shining on you right now. Let yourself settle here. Feel whatever is present without needing to change it. The longing itself is a kind of compass. It always points home. And when you are ready, we will go on together. The Buddha once asked his students a question. If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? They said yes. And if the person is then struck by a second arrow in the same spot, is it even more painful? They said yes, of course. In life, the Buddha said, we cannot always control the first arrow, but the second arrow is our own. This teaching is one of the most practical things the Buddha ever offered. And tonight, as we settle deeper into this quiet space, it is worth understanding what he meant. The first arrow is whatever happens to us. A difficult conversation, a loss, a moment of fear or sadness, a mistake we made, an unkindness we received. These things come uninvited. They are part of being alive. Nobody gets through a life without being struck by first arrows. The second arrow is what we do to ourselves afterward, and it almost always takes the form of judgment. We feel anxious, and then we feel ashamed of feeling anxious. We should be stronger than this. What is wrong with us? Other people seem to handle things so much better. We feel sad, and then we criticize ourselves for feeling sad. We should be over this by now. We are being self-indulgent. We need to pull ourselves together and get on with things. We make a mistake, and instead of simply acknowledging it and learning from it, we launch an inner trial. We are the prosecutor, the judge, and the accused all at once. We build a case. We present evidence from the past, from similar mistakes we have made before, building a pattern of failure that feels airtight. We hand down a verdict, guilty, and the sentence is a heaviness that we carry for hours, days, sometimes years. We lose our patience with someone we love, and then we spend the rest of the evening not just feeling bad about it, but feeling bad about the kind of person who would lose their patience like that. The first arrow was the moment of frustration. The second arrow is the story we build about what that moment says about who we are. That is the second arrow. And in the Buddha's teaching, it is almost always more painful than the first. Because the first arrow is a moment. The second arrow is a story. And stories, as we have seen, can last a very long time. There is something worth noticing about how this works. The first arrow is usually a single event. It happens, it hurts, and then, if left alone, it begins to pass. Buddhist teachers have pointed out that our emotions, when they are not fed by thinking, have a natural lifespan. They arise, they peak, and they dissolve. A wave rises from the ocean, crests, and returns. It does not stay at its peak forever. It cannot. That is not how waves work. And our feelings, at their most basic level, work the same way. The body knows how to process pain. It knows how to grieve, how to release, how to let things move through. It has been doing this for a very long time. But the second arrow interrupts that process. It adds a story to the feeling, and the story keeps the feeling alive long past its natural life. You feel a pang of jealousy, and left alone, it might pass in a few minutes. But if you add the story, I am a jealous person, and that is ugly, and I should be better than this, the jealousy is no longer just a feeling moving through. It has become a verdict about your character, and that verdict can last for days. The wave that wanted to pass through has been frozen in place by the story wrapped around it. This is how we turn a moment of difficulty into something much larger, not by feeling the pain, but by judging ourselves for feeling it. And the layers can stack. You judge yourself for being jealous. Then you judge yourself for being so judgmental. Then you feel frustrated that after all the inner work you have done, all the books you have read, all the intentions you have set, you are still caught in this same old pattern. And that frustration becomes another thing to judge. Arrow after arrow after arrow, each one landing in the wound left by the one before. By the end, the original feeling, that small pang of jealousy, is buried under so many layers of judgment that you can barely find it anymore. You are no longer dealing with jealousy. You are dealing with a story about the kind of person who feels jealous. And that story is much harder to put down. The Buddhist teaching here is very gentle, and it is important. The way out is not to add another layer. It is not to judge the judging. The way out is to stop firing. There is a story about this that comes from the life of the Buddha himself. On the night of his awakening, the Buddha sat beneath a great tree and resolved not to move until he had seen through to the truth of things. As the night deepened, he was visited by a force that Buddhist teachings call Mara. Mara is not a devil in the way other traditions might describe one. Mara is closer to the voice of doubt, the voice of fear, the inner force that tries to pull us back into confusion. Mara came to the Buddha in waves. First came the armies of distraction, thoughts and images and memories, all trying to pull his attention away from the quiet center he had found. They arose and passed, and the Buddha remained still. Then came the forces of desire, visions of everything he had given up, every comfort and pleasure and connection. They arose and passed too. But the last and most powerful assault was doubt. Pure doubt. Not doubt about a particular question or a specific decision, but doubt about himself, about his worth, about his right to be here, about whether someone like him, with all his imperfections and uncertainties, had any business seeking what he was seeking. Who are you, the doubt whispered, to think you deserve this? Who are you to claim this seat? What makes you think you are worthy of awakening? Look at you. Look at all the ways you have fallen short. Look at all the times you have failed. You do not belong here. This is the voice that most of us know intimately. It is the second arrow aimed at the very center of who we are. It is the voice that says, you are not enough. You do not belong. You have not earned the right to be at peace. It is there when we lie awake at night, reviewing our shortcomings. It is there when we compare ourselves to others and come up short. It is there in the quiet moments when we wonder if we will ever feel truly at home in our own lives. And notice what the Buddha did in response. He did not argue with the doubt. He did not fight back. He did not try to prove his worth with a list of accomplishments or qualifications. He did not say, actually, I have meditated for 6 years and fasted and studied with the greatest teachers. He did none of that. He simply reached down and touched the earth. He placed his hand on the ground and called upon the earth itself to witness, not his accomplishments, not his virtue, just his presence, just the fact that he was here, sitting on this ground, part of this world, belonging to it as surely as any tree or stone or river. And the earth responded. In the story, the earth trembled and the dawn broke and Mara vanished. But what this really means is that when the Buddha stopped trying to prove himself and simply connected with something larger, the doubt lost its power. It could not survive in the presence of that connection. It dissolved because it was never real in the way it claimed to be. It was a second arrow, and when he refused to fire it at himself, there was nothing left to sustain it. This story has meant a great deal to Buddhist practitioners for centuries because it is so honest about the nature of doubt. The Buddha himself faced it. The most awakened being in the history of the tradition was not exempt from that inner voice that says, "You are not enough." That should tell us something. It should tell us that this voice is not a measure of our worth. It is a weather pattern. It comes for everyone, and it passes for everyone if we do not feed it with more arrows. The gesture of touching the ground is worth sitting with. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a display of power or spiritual achievement. It was the opposite. It was an act of humility, of connection, of reaching toward something stable and real when everything inside felt uncertain. He did not go up. He went down. He did not reach for something extraordinary or transcendent. He reached for what was most ordinary, most basic, most undeniably real. The ground, the earth, the simple fact of being here, in a body, on this planet, alive in this moment. And in Buddhist teaching, the earth responded. She bore witness. She confirmed what the doubt could not see and what the second arrow tries to deny. That being here is enough. That you do not need special qualifications to sit where you are sitting. That your presence, your simple aliveness, is your right, and no voice of doubt can revoke it. This is perhaps the most comforting image in all of Buddhism. That when the doubt comes, and it will come, you do not have to defeat it. You do not have to out-argue it or out-think it. You can simply reach down and touch what is real. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel your own body, here, breathing, present, and let that be your answer. There is a teaching from a Buddhist contemplative that has stayed with many people. He wrote, "No one is to blame. No one." At first, this can sound too simple, or even irresponsible. Surely some things are someone's fault. Surely accountability matters. And yes, in the practical world, it does. Actions have consequences. Boundaries are important. People need to take responsibility for how they affect each other. But this teaching is pointing at something deeper than the practical world. It is pointing at the inner landscape, the place where the second arrows fly. It is asking us to look underneath the judgments we carry about ourselves and about others, and to see what is actually there. When we look honestly at our own lives, at the patterns we carry, at the ways we leave home and lose our way, we can see that everyone, including ourselves, is acting from the best understanding they have at the time. It may not be very good understanding. It may be clouded by fear, by old pain, by habits that were formed long before we were old enough to choose them. But it is the best we had in that moment. And the same is true of the people who have hurt us and the people we have hurt. This is a hard thing to take in because judgment feels so justified. When we judge ourselves, it feels like honesty. When we judge others, it feels like clarity. But the Buddha's teaching suggests that judgment, however justified it feels, is almost always a second arrow. It adds suffering to suffering. It keeps the wound open. When we can look at ourselves without judgment, something surprising happens. The pain is still there, but the war around it stops. There is room to simply feel what we feel, without needing to decide whether it is right or wrong, deserved or undeserved. And in that space, something begins to heal. Not because we fixed it, but because we stopped standing in the way of the healing that was already trying to happen. A Buddhist teacher once sat with a student who was caught in a cycle of self-blame. The student had been struggling with the same pattern for years, and he was exhausted by it. He said, "I keep doing the same things wrong. I know better, and I still do them. What is the matter with me?" The teacher looked at him kindly and said, "Let me ask you something. When a child is learning to walk and she falls down, does she think there is something the matter with her?" "No," the student said. "She just gets up and tries again?" "Yes." And when she falls again, does she decide she is fundamentally flawed? Does she think, "I have been falling for weeks now. Clearly, I am not the kind of person who can walk"? The student smiled despite himself. "No. She just falls and gets up. That is all you are doing," the teacher said. "You are learning to walk. You will fall many times. That is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are moving. The only people who never fall are the ones who never try." The second arrow is almost always about adding judgment to experience. It takes whatever is here, whatever is real and raw and human, and layers on a verdict. You should be further along. You should know better. You should not still be struggling with this. But the Buddhist path does not ask us to be perfect. It asks us to be aware. And awareness, by its nature, is kind. When you see a small child fall down, your instinct is not to criticize. It is to help. It is to comfort. Awareness has that same quality. When it sees clearly, when it sees without the filter of judgment, it responds with compassion. That is its natural movement, the way water naturally flows downhill. You do not have to manufacture compassion. You only have to remove the judgment that blocks it. The Buddha touched the earth because he understood that he did not need to earn his place here. He did not need to prove anything to anyone, including himself. He just needed to be here, fully, with whatever was arising, and trust the ground beneath him. The ground did not ask him for credentials. It simply held him as it holds everything, without condition. That ground is here for you too. Beneath whatever you are carrying tonight, beneath whatever second arrows you may have been firing at yourself, there is something solid and patient and kind. It does not require your perfection. It does not require an explanation or an apology. It only asks for your presence. It only asks you to be here, just as you are, and let yourself be held. You can reach down and touch it anytime. You can reach down and touch it right now. Let yourself be here, just as you are. Whatever you are carrying does not need to be solved right now. It just needs a little room. And when you are ready, we will continue together. Here is something strange about being human. We spend much of our lives longing for love, for connection, for the feeling of being truly seen and accepted. And yet when love comes toward us, when kindness is offered, when someone looks at us with genuine warmth, something in us tightens. We deflect. We minimize. We change the subject or make a joke or find a reason why it does not really count. A Buddhist teacher who spent years studying this pattern put it simply. He said the hardest thing for most people is not to give love. It is to receive it. This is a surprising idea because we assume that receiving should be easy. Giving is the effort. Giving requires generosity, courage, vulnerability. But receiving, surely that is the simple part. And yet, if you pay close attention to your own life, you may notice that it is not simple at all. That there is something in you that resists being loved. Something that flinches ever so slightly when warmth comes close. Tonight, we look at why that is. And we look at what becomes possible when we begin to soften. There is a story about a husband and wife who lived in a village at the edge of a river. They had been together for many years. They were good to each other, attentive and loyal. Anyone looking at them from the outside would have said they had a strong marriage. And in many ways they did. But something was missing, and both of them could feel it. There was a distance between them that neither could quite name. A coolness. A sense of going through the motions of closeness without quite arriving there. One evening, sitting together by the fire after the day's work was done, the wife turned to her husband and asked a question she had been carrying for a long time. "Do you believe that I love you?" He was quiet. He looked into the fire. She waited. "I know you care for me," he said finally. "I know you are good to me. But if I am honest..." He paused. "No, I do not quite believe it. Something in me does not trust it." She was stricken. "How can you say that? After everything we have shared, everything I do, how can you not know that I love you?" He knew his answer did not make sense. He could list everything she did for him, every kindness, every gesture of care. And yet something in him kept the door closed. It was as if there was a pane of glass between them, invisible but solid. Her love reached the glass and stopped. He could see it. He just could not feel it. "It is not about you," he said quietly. "It is something in me. It is as if I am always waiting for the other thing. The catch. The condition. The moment when it turns out to be less than I thought." This conversation changed something between them. Not immediately and not easily. But it opened an honest inquiry that they pursued together for a long time. And what the husband began to discover, slowly and with great tenderness toward himself, was that he had been blocking love his entire life. Not on purpose. Not out of stubbornness or ingratitude, but out of a deep, wordless fear that if he let it in fully, if he really opened to it, it would be taken away. And that losing it would be worse than never having it. So he had learned, long ago, to keep the door cracked rather than open. To accept love in small, controlled doses. Enough to survive on, but never enough to be truly nourished by. And his wife, for all her patience and devotion, could feel the glass between them. She could feel her love reaching toward him and being met with something that was not rejection, exactly, but was not reception either. It was a kind of polite distance, a smile that did not quite reach the eyes. What was remarkable was that once he began to see this pattern, he saw it everywhere. Not just with his wife, but with friends, with his children, with moments of beauty in the natural world. The sunset was beautiful, and he could think the thought, "that is beautiful," without actually letting the beauty touch him. Someone was kind, and he could register the kindness without letting it enter. He had been living behind glass for so long that he had mistaken the glass for the world. Buddhist teachers have observed this pattern in human beings for thousands of years. We long for love, and we defend against it at the same time. The longing and the defending happen simultaneously, like breathing in and holding your breath at once. One part of us reaches out, and another part pulls back, and we live in that tension without even knowing it is there. And the defense is not just mental, it is physical. We armor ourselves in the body. We tighten the muscles of the chest and the belly. We hold our shoulders in a subtle brace, as if preparing for an impact that may or may not come. We clench the jaw. We shallow the breathing. And this bracing, over years, becomes so familiar that we do not even notice it anymore. It becomes the way we are. We think it is just how our body feels. We do not realize that it is a posture of protection, held in place by an old decision made long ago, that it is safer to be closed than open. You can notice this in small moments. Someone pays you a genuine compliment, and instead of letting it land, you brush it aside. Oh, it was nothing. Anyone would have done the same. You find a way to make yourself smaller than the kindness being offered. Someone tells you they appreciate you, and something in your chest tightens rather than softens. You deflect the words before they can reach you. You let them bounce off the glass. Or you hear them, but you hear them from a distance, as if they were meant for someone else who happens to share your name. Or perhaps you do the opposite. You hear the kind words, and instead of receiving them, you immediately wonder what the person wants. What are they after? What is the angle? Is this real, or is it a performance? The mind, trained by years of self-protection, turns kindness into a puzzle rather than a gift. The Buddha spoke often about the barriers we build between ourselves and the world. He called them hindrances, obstacles that prevent us from seeing clearly and feeling fully. And one of the most powerful barriers, one that runs quietly underneath so many of the others, is the inability to let ourselves be loved, to let warmth in, to trust that what is being offered is real, and that we are allowed to have it. There is a story about a traveler and a ferryman that carries this teaching gently. A man was journeying to a monastery in the hills on the far side of a wide river. He hired a young ferryman to take him across. The ferryman was new to the work. He was nervous, and the river was high from recent rains. Partway across, the current caught the boat and pulled them off course. The ferryman struggled with the oar, overcorrected, and they drifted further. The traveler gripped the side of the boat. His body went rigid. Fear turned quickly to frustration, and frustration to a cold, quiet anger. They made it across eventually, wet and shaken, arriving far downstream from where they had intended. The traveler climbed out of the boat. He looked at the ferryman, who was young and clearly embarrassed, standing ankle-deep in the shallows, holding the rope. "I will not be paying for this," the traveler said. His voice was calm and measured, as if he were being perfectly reasonable. "You should know that." The ferryman nodded. He did not argue. He just stood there, holding the rope, as the traveler turned and walked away up the bank. The traveler reached the monastery by evening. He was given a room. He sat on the edge of his bed, and something was wrong. There was a tightness in his chest that would not release. His mind kept replaying the scene at the river, the ferryman's face, the words he had spoken. And underneath the replaying, there was a feeling he did not want to look at. He had been unkind. The ferryman was young, inexperienced, trying his best in difficult conditions. He had a family, probably. He needed the fare. And the traveler, out of his own fear and discomfort, had punished him for it, had walked away feeling justified, even righteous. And now, alone in a quiet room, the justification was crumbling, and what was left underneath it was shame. He sat with it. It was uncomfortable, but he had been studying with Buddhist teachers long enough to know that turning away from a feeling only makes it louder. So he let himself feel it. The contraction in his chest, the heat in his face, the heaviness in his stomach. The shame was not just about the ferryman. It was older than that. It was about all the times he had chosen hardness over kindness, control over connection, being right over being loving. He could see, with painful clarity, how much of his life had been spent behind armor. And then something in him began to shift. He put his hands over his heart, a gesture he had learned from a Buddhist teacher years ago, and he said quietly, to himself and to the ferryman he could no longer see, "I am sorry. I am sorry for the hardness. I am sorry for closing my heart." He said it again and again. Each time, it went a little deeper. And as he repeated it, something began to loosen. The armor he had been wearing, the armor he wore so habitually that he had forgotten it was there, started to thin. He could feel his own vulnerability underneath it, tender and raw. The fear that had made him rigid in the boat. The deeper fear underneath that, the old one, the one that said, "If I am soft, I will be hurt. If I am open, I will be taken advantage of. I have to stay hard to stay safe." He had carried that belief for so long. It had served him in its way. It had gotten him through difficult times. But tonight, in this quiet room, he could feel the cost of it. The loneliness, the distance from others, the inability to receive what was offered. And in the softening, something unexpected happened. He began to feel a warmth spreading through his chest. It was not something he was generating through effort. It was more like something that had been blocked was now flowing again. A stream that had been dammed was finding its way through the cracks in the stone. He sat there for a long time, his hands on his heart, letting the warmth move through him. And he understood something he had not understood before. The hardness had not been keeping him safe. It had been keeping him separate. From the ferryman, from his own tenderness, from the love that was always available, always flowing, if only he would stop bracing against it. He understood, too, that the ferryman had not been his problem. The ferryman was just a young man doing his best. The problem was the armor. The problem was always the armor. It turned every encounter into a threat, every vulnerability into a danger, every moment of uncertainty into a reason to close down. And the cost of that closing was loneliness. A loneliness so familiar, that he had stopped recognizing it as loneliness and had started calling it strength. The next morning, he walked back down to the river. The air was fresh, and the light was soft on the water. He found the ferryman preparing his boat for the day. He paid him double the fare and thanked him for the crossing. The ferryman looked surprised, but he smiled, a genuine smile, open and warm. And the traveler felt it. He let it in. They stood together for a moment by the water, two people sharing a simple human exchange, before the traveler bowed slightly and continued on his way. The Buddhist teaching at the heart of this is that love is not something we have to manufacture. It is not something we have to earn or deserve. It is already here, flowing through everything, like water through the ground. Our only task, if it can even be called a task, is to stop blocking it. And blocking it is what we do, almost all the time, without realizing it. We block it with judgment. We block it with busyness. We block it with the belief that we have to earn it first. We block it with the fear that if we let it in, we will be vulnerable. And we block it with the deep, quiet conviction that we are not quite worthy of it. But worthiness was never the question. The sun does not ask whether the earth deserves its warmth. The river does not ask whether the valley deserves its water. Love, in the Buddhist understanding, is not a reward. It is a force. It is the natural state of things. And it is always here, waiting, the way the father in the ancient story waited by the road. The husband who could not believe his wife loved him was not lacking love. He was lacking the ability to receive it. And the traveler who could not be kind to the ferryman was not lacking kindness. He was locked behind armor that kept everything, the good and the bad, from getting through. When we soften, when we let the armor thin even a little, something beautiful happens. We do not just start feeling more love from others. We start feeling it from within. It comes from somewhere deeper than the mind, deeper than the stories we tell about ourselves. It rises on its own, and it fills the spaces that the armor used to occupy. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "You have everything you need to be happy right in this moment." This is what he meant. Not that life is always easy, not that pain does not exist, but that the capacity for love, for warmth, for genuine connection is not something you need to go out and acquire. It is already woven into you. It is the fabric itself. And the only thing that ever stood between you and that love was the belief that you needed to protect yourself from it. You do not need to protect yourself from love. You never did. The armor was built by a younger version of you who did not know any better, who was doing the best they could with what they had. And you can thank that younger self for trying so hard to keep you safe. But you can also, gently, begin to set the armor down. You do not need it here. Not tonight. Rest here for a moment. If you can, let your shoulders drop a little. Let the muscles of your chest soften, even slightly. There is nothing to protect against right now. You are safe here. And whenever you are ready, we will come to our final resting place together. We have traveled a long way together tonight, through forests and mountains, through stories old and new, through the quiet country of the mind and the tender territory of the heart. We have met teachers and students, monks and thieves, tigers and ferrymen. We have heard the Buddha speak, and we have heard the silence between his words. We have looked at our thoughts, and found that they were not as solid as they seemed. We have looked at our beliefs and found open space where we expected stone walls. We have looked at our longing and found that it was pointing us home all along. And now we arrive at the simplest place of all, the place where there is nothing left to do, nothing left to understand, nothing left to fix or figure out. Just this. A Zen master was once asked by a student, "What is the meaning of all of this? The teachings, the practice, the years of sitting. What does it all come down to?" The master said, "Have you eaten your rice?" "Yes," the student said. "Then wash your bowl." That was the entire teaching. Eat your rice. Wash your bowl. Be here for what is here. Do what is in front of you. And when it is done, let it be done. The student had expected something more. A revelation. A secret. A key that would unlock everything. But the master was offering something better than a key. He was offering freedom from the belief that there is a locked door. There is no door. There is no lock. There is just this: rice, a bowl, water, the feeling of your hands doing simple work. That is the whole of it. There is a profound peace in this kind of simplicity. The mind wants to make things complicated. It wants to search for hidden meanings, deeper layers, more advanced teachings. But the deepest teaching in Zen Buddhism is the one that keeps returning us to what is most ordinary. This breath, this moment, this body resting where it rests, the sound of the room around you, the weight of your own limbs. These things are not obstacles to the sacred. They are the sacred. They always were. The Japanese Zen teacher Dogen, who founded one of the great schools of Zen, wrote something that has been carried gently through the centuries. He said that the whole moon and the whole sky are reflected in a single drop of dew on a blade of grass. The moon does not get wet. The dewdrop is not broken. Sit with that image for a moment. A drop of dew, tiny and trembling on the tip of a blade of grass in the early morning. And inside it, the entire sky. The moon, the stars, the vastness of space. All of it reflected perfectly in something so small you could miss it entirely if you were not paying attention. The dewdrop does not try to hold the sky. It does not strain or reach or make an effort. It simply rests where it is, still and clear, and the sky appears in it naturally. The reflection is effortless. It is what happens when something is transparent enough, quiet enough, open enough. The vastness comes in on its own. And here is the part that makes this teaching so gentle. The moon does not get wet. The dewdrop is not broken. They meet without damaging each other. The vastness does not overwhelm the small. The small does not diminish the vast. They simply reflect one another perfectly in the cool quiet of the morning. Dogen was saying something about us, about what we are. We spend so much of our lives trying to become bigger, to expand, to acquire more understanding, more experience, more wisdom. We think we need to grow large enough to contain the truth. But Dogen is suggesting the opposite. We do not need to become vast. We only need to become still. We only need to become clear. And then the vastness, which was always here, reflects in us naturally. This is what the Buddhist teachers have been pointing toward all evening. The mud settles and the water clears. The fog thins and the sky appears. the armor softens, and love flows in. We do not create these things. We allow them. We stop interfering with what is already happening, and the natural clarity of awareness shines through on its own. You do not need to hold the whole sky. You only need to be quiet enough to let it appear. And you are quiet now. You have been growing quieter all evening. The sky is already here. There is another image from the Zen tradition that belongs here, near the end of our time together. A student once asked a Zen master, "The whole world is medicine. What then is the self?" The master replied, "Where is anything that is not medicine?" This is a strange and wonderful exchange. The student is asking about identity, about who or what we are in a world that is entirely made of healing. And the master's answer is not really an answer at all. It is an invitation to stop dividing, to stop separating yourself from the world around you, to stop asking where you end and the medicine begins. Because if the whole world is medicine, then everything is working toward wholeness. Every experience, every encounter, every moment of difficulty, and every moment of ease. The difficult conversation you had last week, that was medicine. The quiet evening you spent alone, that was medicine. The worry that kept you up last night, even that was medicine, because it brought you here, to this place of listening, where something gentler could reach you. And the peace that is settling into you right now, that is medicine too. You are not separate from it. You are not standing outside the process, waiting for the healing to arrive from somewhere else. You are inside it. Your awareness is part of it. Your willingness to listen, to feel, to be present with whatever arises, that is the medicine at work. It has been at work all evening. In Buddhism, there is a word for this interconnection. It is sometimes translated as interbeing. It means that nothing exists entirely on its own. Everything is woven into everything else. The dewdrop contains the sky. The sky contains the dewdrop. You contain the world, and the world contains you. The breath you are taking right now is shared with the trees, with the oceans, with every living thing. There is no boundary between what is inside you and what is outside you, not really. The boundary is a thought, and thoughts, as we have seen tonight, are real, but they are not the full truth. You do not need to understand this intellectually. You can feel it. You may be feeling it right now. A quietness that is not empty but full. A stillness that is not dead but alive. A sense of resting in something that holds you, something much larger than your individual story, something that has been holding you all along. Throughout tonight, we have explored many teachings. We have named our thoughts and watched them pass, like visitors arriving at the door and moving on. We have seen how habits can become invisible walls, and how a tiger can forget her own freedom. We have looked directly at our beliefs and found that they could not withstand honest looking. We have traced our longing back to its source and discovered that what we were searching for was never far away, that the Father was already watching the road. We have learned to set down the second arrow, to stop adding judgment to pain. We have touched the ground and felt it hold us. And we have softened the armor around our hearts, even just a little, and felt something warm begin to flow through. And all of these teachings, every story, every insight, every quiet realization, they point in the same direction. Toward this moment, this awareness, this open, quiet presence that has been here all along, underneath the noise, behind the clouds, beneath the mud, within the dewdrop. The Zen tradition has a beautiful phrase for what we arrive at when all the searching stops. They call it nothing special, and they mean it as the highest compliment, because what we discover when we stop looking for something extraordinary is that the ordinary is extraordinary. This breath is extraordinary. This moment of quiet is extraordinary. The fact that you are here, alive, aware, able to feel and listen and rest, that is the most remarkable thing in the world. And it does not require anything of you. It does not require your effort or your perfection or your understanding. It only requires your presence. The Buddha, after all his years of searching, after leaving home and wandering and fasting and practicing, after sitting through the night beneath the great tree and facing every doubt, what did he find? He found what was already here. He found this: the morning star appearing above the trees, the cool air on his skin, the quiet of his own awareness, undisturbed, unconditioned, free. He did not find it somewhere else. He found it right where he was sitting. He found it in the most ordinary moment imaginable. A man, sitting on the ground, looking up at the sky, and realizing that what he was looking at was also what he was looking with. The awareness and the sky were not two different things. They never had been. He did not need the years of wandering. He did not need the fasting or the austerities. These things brought him to the moment of readiness, yes. But what he found was not the result of his effort. It was what remained when the effort stopped. It was what was already here, waiting, patient, undisturbed, the way the ground waits beneath our feet, no matter how far we roam. And you are here, right now, sitting or lying down or resting somewhere quiet. You do not need to go anywhere. You do not need to become anything. You are already what you are looking for. There is a poem from the Zen tradition that has been passed down for many centuries. It speaks of flowers in spring, of the moon in autumn, of a cool breeze in summer, of snow in winter. Simple things, ordinary things. And it ends with this simple observation: if your mind is not clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best season of your life. If your mind is not clouded by unnecessary things, what are the unnecessary things? They are the things we have been gently setting aside all evening. The worried thoughts that tell us something is wrong. The judgments that tell us we are not enough. The wanting that tells us happiness is somewhere else. The armor that tells us we are not safe to be open. These are the clouds. They are real, but they are not the sky. Tonight, many of those clouds have thinned. The worries are still there perhaps, but they are quieter. The judgments are still there, but they have less grip. The stories about who you are and what you should be are still there, but they feel a little more transparent, a little less solid. Like clouds becoming wisps, letting more and more light through. And that sky, that light, is you. It has always been you. Before the first thought arose this morning, the sky was here. Before the first worry, the first plan, the first self-criticism, the sky was here. It will be here after the last thought fades tonight. It will be here tomorrow morning when the thoughts start up again. It does not come and go. It does not depend on conditions. It is the one thing about you that has never changed. You are not the clouds. You are not the weather. You are not the stories the mind tells about who you are, or what you lack, or what you need to become. You are the sky. You have always been the sky. Before the stories began, the sky was here. Before the worry started, the sky was here. Before you learned to armor yourself, before you learned to judge yourself, before you learned to chase after things that could never satisfy, the sky was here. Open, quiet, undisturbed. And it has room for everything. Room for the joy and the sadness. Room for the fear and the courage. Room for the longing and the love. Room for all of it, without being diminished by any of it. The sky has never been made smaller by any cloud that has ever passed through it. And you have never been made smaller by any thought or feeling or experience that has ever passed through you. You only thought you were, and that thought, too, was just a cloud. So rest now. Let everything be as it is. The dewdrop does not try to hold the sky. It simply rests, and the sky appears. You have done enough for today. You have listened. You have been open. You have been willing to look at things you normally turn away from, and you have been gentle with what you found. That is more than enough. That is everything. The whole world is medicine, and you are part of it. You always were. You were part of it before you knew it, and you will be part of it long after tonight fades from memory. Let the breath come and go on its own. Let the body be heavy and warm. Let the mind do whatever it does. Thinking or not thinking, wandering or settling, it does not matter. You do not need to manage it anymore. The sky does not manage the clouds. It simply holds them and lets them pass. There is nothing left to reach for, nothing left to solve, nothing left to become. Just this vast, quiet, open awareness that has been here all along, waiting for you to stop and notice it. And you have noticed it. You are noticing it right now. Everything you need is already here. It always was. It was only ever hidden, never lost. And now the clouds have thinned, and the sky is shining through, and there is nothing between you and it, because there never was. The sky and the one who sees the sky were always the same thing. Let yourself rest now, fully, completely. There is nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. Just this breath, just this stillness, just this wide open undisturbed sky. And whenever you drift off, know that the sky will still be here. It will be here when you wake. It will be here tomorrow. It has always been here, and it always will be. There is a story about a fish who swam up to an older fish one day and asked, "I keep hearing about this thing called the ocean. Can you tell me where to find it?" The older fish smiled. "You are swimming in it," she said. "No, this is just water," the young fish replied. "I am looking for the ocean." And he swam away, still searching. This is how it is with the sky. We look for peace somewhere beyond where we are. We look for wholeness in the next experience, the next insight, the next quiet evening. And all the while, we are swimming in it. We are made of it. The awareness that is listening to these words right now, the awareness that has been here all evening, resting, receiving, gently letting things settle, that awareness is not a visitor. It is not something that arrived when you pressed play and will leave when the recording ends. It is what you are. The sky does not come and go. Clouds come and go. Weather comes and goes. Moods, thoughts, worries, joys, plans, regrets, all of it comes and goes. But the sky is always here. It was here before you were born. It will be here long after the last thought of the evening fades. It is the one thing about you that has never been injured, never been diminished, never been made less by anything that has passed through it. And the beautiful thing about the sky is that it does not try. It does not effort. It does not strain to be vast. It simply is. And you, in your deepest nature, are the same. You do not need to try to be aware. Awareness is already happening. You do not need to try to be present. Presence is what remains when you stop trying to be somewhere else. Right now, in this moment, nothing is required of you. No effort, no concentration, no understanding. Just the quiet fact of being here, breathing, listening, resting in something that was never disturbed and never will be. Tomorrow, the clouds will return. The thoughts will start up again. The worries will knock at the door. The old stories will put on their familiar costumes, and the mind will begin its narration as if nothing has changed. And that is fine. That is just weather. Because something has changed, even if it is small. You have heard, perhaps for the first time or perhaps as a gentle reminder, that you are not obligated to believe everything your mind tells you. That the thoughts are real, but they are not the whole truth. That the armor can soften. That the longing points home. That the ground will hold you. You do not need to carry any of this with you. Whatever was meant to land has already landed. It is in you now, quiet and settled, like a seed in good soil. You do not need to dig it up and check on it. You do not need to remember every word. The seed knows what to do. For now, there is only rest. The body is heavy and warm. The breath is soft. The mind may still be murmuring, or it may have grown quiet. Either way, you are here. Either way, the sky is here. There is nothing more to learn tonight. Nothing more to hold on to. If you remember anything from this evening, let it be this. You were never broken. The peace you were looking for was never missing. It was here the whole time, waiting, patient, undisturbed, the way the sky waits behind every cloud that has ever crossed it. And the sky is at peace. It has always been at peace. It will always be at peace. And you are the sky. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.